Good evening, friends. Welcome to our next session. As I told you yesterday, that we are going to first have our foundation strong, make our basics clear, and then proceed further with our regular topics on the syllabus for our examination. For going for the battle, we have to prepare ourselves first. So today's topic, like yesterday, we tried to understand what law is, what do we mean by law, why we require law, how it evolved over a period of time, and what is the latest, the present position, how do we look at law, and different theories of law, uh, then how law is made. Okay. And the last part of that was how to read the law in its present form, that is, in the form of a bare act. How to read it, how it looks like, though it may appear to be, very, very small issues and to some extent unrelated or unimportant for a student of law who is going to write the highest or the toughest examination of the country, that is the civil services examination. But we all must understand that we must have a solid foundation to have a strong building. So that's what we are trying to do now. Our second part is the second step towards better understanding of the subject is understanding governance. Like yesterday, we had understanding law. Now, law as such is for controlling or regulating the behavior of the human beings. But today, we are going to learn as to how we are governed as human beings first, because we are taking different forms of governance through our discussion. How different forms of governance are there? It's not only confined to India or how we are being governed, but we must have an idea of the overall governance models globally. That is why we have this, globe before us, that it's going to be a much, much wider discussion. Then, of course, we will narrow down to our own governance system. Step by step, we will proceed towards that. So, let's start with our today's topic, understanding governance. Now, first thing we should, it occurs to our mind, what do we mean by governance? See, as I told you, that law is for regulating the behavior. It gives us certain rights, it imposes certain duties. Then who does that? Anyone who imposes those restrictions, cast upon us those duties, and gives us the privileges of certain rights, controls our behavior, how our behavior should be controlled in this society where we are living. So, in that is called governance, how the whole system should work. Who will be the subject? Who will be the master? Who will be making laws for us? Who will be implementing the laws? And if we are aggrieved, where we should go, and who will provide us the redressal of those grievances. So, different forms of government, different parts of the government, different functions of the government. This is what we are going to try to learn today. Okay. So basically, we cannot name a particular type of governance into a very watertight compartment. It sometimes it is overlapping, sometimes it has got a shadow of another type of governance. So one type of governance in the present scenario is not feasible or it's not being practiced. What we have is either a blend of the two types or one type having effect or shadows of other types. Broadly speaking, we can have republic form of government, we can have democracy, we can have dictatorship, we can have communism, we can have tyranny, we can have monarchy, and maybe some other forms. These are the forms which are very well known to us and which we can see being practiced not only in our own system but system elsewhere internationally. You may think that this is a topic relating to maybe political science. A student of political science is more, interested in this, or a student of public administration. But as a law students, we must know all these terms. These terms are being used very frequently and their meaning are very, very important to us to understand. So simply we should not just say that that particular form of government is, it's a communism, they're following communism, or it is monarchy. We must know their meanings and how they function. Okay. So let us first start with the republic. What do you mean by republic? Because ours is also a republic. We say Republic of India, right? So what do you mean by republic? Now it is derived from the Latin expression res publica. That means it belongs to the public. Res publica, the public thing. That means public are electing their leader. The head of the state is elected, is chosen by the people, citizens. So, one thing is the public thing means what? The head of state is an elected person. Very, very important because this is how it distinguishes republic or our format of governance from others. So we must know first our own system of governance. The head of state is elected. These are the two key words. Who is head of the state? That we will see later on. Who is constitutional head, who is de jure and de facto, we'll see later. But just keep it in mind that it is the public, it is the people who elect the head of the state, who is going to govern them. Form of government in which a state is ruled by representatives of the citizen body. So, the same. Who are the representatives? Who are chosen by the public. They choose their representatives to govern them. Okay? This is a statement from a French philosopher. The rightly ordered government of a number of families and of those things which are their common concern by a sovereign power. Now, sovereign, let us just understand what is sovereign power. Right? Before we get into this is a complex statement and I don't want to scare you these kind of statements because I want to make it very, very simple for you to understand. First thing is, what is a sovereign power? Actually, a sovereign power is one which is not controlled by others, whose actions are not controlled by any external force. That state is called sovereign state, which can take its own decisions with respect to its internal matters as well as the external matters. That means how they will be having their relations with others and how they will be communicating with the international community, how they will be having their relationships with other states and internationally how their actions will be. Now, all those actions, all those relationships are to be made by the state itself. The state should be having total freedom to do that. Their decisions are not to be influenced by others. For example, like India is a sovereign state. Now, that means we can choose to which international organization should we belong to, which treaty we should sign, what should be our relationship with our neighbors or other countries, and they should not be influenced or dictated by others. We should take our own decision. That is the sovereign power. And not only external, but internally also our internal system of governance. What will be our internal governance, our internal security matters, our economy, our agriculture policies, our industrial policies should not be influenced by others. See, you may say today is the era of globalization. We cannot live in isolation. That is all right. That is, while we are communicating, our international relations are there. But those, like if we have to decide how much FDI we should allow, which community we should allow to be imported freely, where we should invite capital, where we should invest it. What should be our internal economic policies and priorities, whether agriculture, industry, what kind of economy we want to have, whether it is a mixed economy or a government controlled economy or a free economy. So all these decisions are independent decisions in a sovereign state. So ours is a sovereign state. This is very, very important because this word we will be using very frequently when we study the other parts of our syllabus. So it is the government which is, of common, they have a common concern. That means whatever is happening is a common concern of all the people of or the citizens of that state. The leader is periodically appointed. What do we mean by this? The leader, as I said, is the head of the state. He leads the nation. He leads the governance of the nation. And he is not a permanent one, like in the case of a dictator or a monarch. We'll see how they function, but to be periodically appointed. Now, what is the tenure of our president? President of India is the normal term is 5 years. What is the normal term of the Prime Minister? Because the term of Lok Sabha is 5 years. So, head of the leader of the House is the Prime Minister, and his tenure is coterminous with the Lok Sabha. Now, there may be situations that he may be, there may be change of leadership like that, but I'm talking of the normal situation. And that is where the word periodical comes into being. It's for a period, a fixed period, can be renewed, can be, re-elected, etc. But the period is, it's not the meaning is that it is not permanent. That means elections periodically, to be elected periodically, not permanently. So now we come to another important term, democracy. Another form of government is democracy. Demos means whole citizen living within a particular city state. Now actually demos is the people. It is the rule of the people. That means power or rule is by whom? Rule of people. Right? Cracy is, kratos means power or rule. Demos is the people. So rule by the people. How? We'll see how it functions. Now, a form of government in which all eligible citizens have an equal say. That means what? That means the participation of the people in electing the government. So, who takes the decisions that affect their lives? It is the government. If that form of government is democracy, a government which takes the decisions that affect the lives of the citizens. So, and that means in a democracy, all citizens get equal right to what? To have a equal say in electing the government. Okay? So, people have the say in formation of government. How? Through the process of voting. Through voting, what they do? They elect their representatives. These representatives of the people who ultimately form the government and run the governance. Okay? Allows people to participate equally. How? Either directly or through the elected representatives. Now, what do you mean by directly? This is very important because in some countries we find that the people are participating in taking those decisions which affect their lives directly through a direct vote. And that is called what? That is called the, like we have in Switzerland. And that term is what? Referendum. Remember these terms. This will help you in your polity paper also in the general studies. I am taking general topics which are not only going to make your foundation strong but also prepare you for your general studies examination also in the polity paper. So, okay, this is directly like we have in Switzerland. They conduct referendum where people directly vote in decision making, in important decision makings. and like ours, where we govern the country through our elected representatives, whom we elect periodically for a fixed term, and then they take decisions on our behalf, on behalf of the people. Free and equal practice of political self-determination. What is this self-determination? Self-determination, as the word indicates, that self means we, ourselves, hum. Determination is to determine, to decide. So it is taking, and what is political? Political self-determination, that means we decide what kind of political system has to be there and what it should be free and equal right available to all the citizens. Focuses on will of the people. Now, who will reflect the will of the people? Whom we elect. That is our elected representatives. So the direct democracies, people vote on policy initiatives directly, and here it is the referendum. Representative democracy, people vote for representatives who then vote on policy initiatives. I've just made it clear to you. The famous saying of Abraham Lincoln, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. What do you mean by this? Of the people. It is government, the people, it is the government of the people. It is their own government. Nobody else has imposed upon them the governance. For the people, they are working, they are taking decisions for the people. And by the people is they themselves elect. It is by them. So, shall not perish from the earth. This is the importance of democracy. That this is supposed to be the best known form of the government, where people are deciding their own governance, who will govern them. And this is not going to fade away, right? It's not going to perish from the earth, because this is the best known form of the government. And we are lucky that we have a democratic setup of governance in India. Now, let us see how democracy and republic work together. As we have seen, in the case of direct democracy, we are talking of direct democracy, how it works and how the republic works. Here, the people, they are voting and making the law, as we have seen in the case of referendum. In the case of republic, there are people here, they are voting, whom their representatives, they then decide and make the law. Okay? So, there are basically two stages. Here it is only one stage. But what we have in India is a democratic republic. Okay? So, how, I think these terms should be clear to you before we enter into the area of, using the terms democratic republic or, by the people, and how the whole system will work. We first understand what these terms mean and how the system works under each type of governance. Now we come to another form of governance. We should know others also. We have just understood what we are, but we should know others also. Dictatorship, a single person, a dictator, he has the absolute power. His word is the law. Okay, so this is very important. A single person who is the dictator has the final say. The term dictatorship means it is the Latin title dictator, which in Roman Republic designated a temporary magistrate. During those times, they should be there, who was granted extraordinary powers in order to deal with the state crisis. Now, those days are gone, but in few countries still there is dictatorship, a single person rule. So either he seizes control of the state. Now, how a dictator gets into the control, how he gets the control of the state, the governance of the state, is either by force or through unfair elections. This is very important. There also may be elections, but they are all using unfair means. What are those unfair means? They will not allow their opponents to fight against them. They will manipulate the voting process. But here in India, in a democracy, true democracy, we have regulatory authorities like Independent Constitutional Regulatory Authority, that is the Election Commission of India, who has been given the task of conducting free and fair elections. So we cannot have a dictator. We can have a truly democratically elected representatives who are going to govern us. How they seize the control, the dictators, as we have seen in military coups in Pakistan, our neighbors. We have seen it sometimes in Bangladesh too, where what happens overnight, the military takes over and the head of the military organization becomes the dictator. He will change the constitution, he will change the system of the governance to be followed, and his word will be the final word and command, unfettered, uncontrolled. Now, the examples are, we have very famous case of North Korea. Anybody who opposes the dictator is eliminated, is punished and killed. Now we come to monarchy. State power is held by a single family. As the name indicates, monarchy, Rajasi, a one family show. Their dictatorship was one single person show, it is one family show. That inherits, that means the power of governance remains with the family, within the family, and it is inherited from the previous generation. Like there is a king, there will be a prince who will be named as the future king, and once the king is not there, either killed or eliminated or whatever it is, he takes over. Right? So inherits rules from one generation to the next. An individual from the royal family holds the position of power until they die, or they are killed or they are removed. Today, the majority of monarchy governments have transitioned to constitutional monarchies. How? We will see. We'll see the example. Now, in United Kingdoms, what do we have? We also have a monarch. We have the queen. We have the prince. But previously, historically, that family was ruling United Kingdom. But now they have transited into democracy. Monarchy is still there, but now their form of governance is no longer monarchy. It is now transitioned into the democracy. Take the example of Nepal. We had monarchy there, but now they have transitioned into democracy. Only a few countries where the monarch retains, there are still examples like we have Saudi Arabia, Oman, Brunei, Swaziland. Now, these are the countries where still monarchy is there. The king dies, the prince designate becomes the king. Now we come to another form, communism. Basically, it is a political and economic theory. Political theory is where there is a set of people who are in command. They rule the rest of the state, all the citizens of the state. Economy is very important as far as communism is concerned because the economic control, complete control is with the state. In which all property is owned by the community. They call it community, but basically it is the state. Everything belongs to the state. Each person contributes and receives according to their ability and needs. They will not earn money as it happens in a free economy. They will be given only that much which they need. It is only to fulfill their needs. Rest everything belongs to the state. State control of the economy to attain greater equality, often at the expense of individual liberty. That means individual liberty is secondary to them. State's control is first. Whereas in a democracy like ours, we have focus on the individual liberty. At present, now we have People's Republic of China, Republic of Cuba, Laos, and Vietnam. Now these are few examples of communism. So socialism versus communism, how it works, the democratic socialism. Now we are using the word socialism. Again, this is very important term because it will be occurring again in the preamble and in other parts of the other provisions of the Constitution when we study that in detail. So, socialism is where the state is controlling, but there is no concentration of wealth in few hands. It has to be equitably distributed. It belongs to everyone. So there is no concentration of wealth, no concentration of income in few hands. That is the basis of socialism. Here we have parliamentary democracy. In communism, it is mainly revolution. Through revolts, through revolutions, they come to power. Individual liberty is important. As we have, authoritarian state ignores liberty of the individual. Mix of public and private sector. Their state is controlling all the industry. What do you mean by mixed? Mix of public and private sector? Like we have here, we allow private sector, but we also have public sector. Like public sector undertakings. Why? Because there are certain important sovereign functions which the state thinks should be controlled by the state, but through the public sector. So both of them are coexisting. Most prices determined by free market. Free market, because of the competition, the prices are determined through free market. Prices are set by the government. Redistribution of income through tax and benefits. What do we mean by that? That when people are free to earn, so there is a taxation system, both on their personal income and also on certain areas where they are spending the money. They have to pay taxes to the government. Okay? Like there may be direct taxes or indirect taxes like income tax, like customs, central excise, or others. Then there may be a GST on whatever services or goods we procure, we pay taxes to the state. And through those taxes, they are distributed. That means the government salaries are paid from those taxes, the government expenditure is incurred from those taxes. So that tax revenue and expenses are maintained through this system of redistribution. Here, equality of income, wages are set by the government that all of them, this category of people will be paid this much only. The basic thing being, as we have just discussed, to meet their needs, not to live a luxurious life, but to meet their needs. Equality of opportunity is the main goal. Here, equality of outcome. What do you mean by this? That state is interested in getting the output, the outcome. Like the people are putting their labor, state is putting the capital, and then there is a production, and that's everything which is produced is being controlled by the state. So in that case, state is more interested in the outcome. Decentralized initiative, we have local workers council. This is a centralized economy where decision is coming from the top. Don't get into too many details, just try to understand how these two systems function. Support for trade unions and workers, like we have commitment towards minimum wages. Here trade unions not allowed as state claim, not needed. Broadly, Keynesian economy policies to deal with recession, direct intervention and claim no unemployment. Don't get into these details, just try to understand the concept. Progressive tax system, no need for progressive tax system. Wages are same, so they don't have to have progressive tax system. Subsidized house building, mixture of private and public ownership. It is all mostly public housing. There's a mix of private and public ownership of the property. Make use of existing financial system, but try to reforms. Reforms are very important for the welfare of the people. Here, state is controlling everything, including banks and finances. So we have quickly we'll go through some other forms of the government, but broadly speaking, whatever is the international scenario, including our own country, we have discussed so far. We'll see what is aristocracy. It is a form of government that places power in the hands of a small, privileged ruling classes like royal families. Autocracy is a form of government in which power resides in the hand of one single person, that is the king. Autocracy. Oligarchy, ruled by a small number of people, a group of people. So unlike aristocracy, in oligarchy, these people do not rule directly and are not a class. There, a class was controlling. Here, a group of people are controlling. The example is Russia, Turkey, and Iran. These are some of the countries where we have oligarchy. Theocracy is basically religion-based. So where the priests rule in the name of God or by officials who are regarded as divinely guided, like we have in Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Vatican. We have the Pope. That is a religious leader who is governing the country. Fascism is like they control the people through brutal power. They will not have any opposition, like we had Adolf Hitler of Germany, Mussolini of Italy, etc. So, uh, very rarely nowadays we find these fascism as the form of government. Anarchy is free for all. There is no rule at all. So usually resulting from a failure of when the government fails, there is anarchy everywhere. There is nobody to control, and it's like looting and no, absolutely no law, no rule of law, no law at all. Plutocracy, government ruled by rich or power provided by wealth, often used to describe a wealthy class ruling a government, often from behind the scenes. Okay, so these are all old forms of government, very difficult to find out. Tyranny is again absolute ruler, arbitrary exercise. What do you mean by arbitrary? This word we will be using very often. Arbitrary is whatever I feel, whatever is my will, I impose my will. Whatever I feel like, I take decisions like that. So whatever the ruler feels like, he takes that decision. Whatever the decision-making body feels like, they take the decision without any reasoning. So there's total, absence of reasoning, and most of the decisions are biased decisions. Totalitarian system in which a single political authority regulates total control over the state. We have, People's Republic of centralized and dictatorial. Okay. Now we come to parliamentary system. System in which the executive branch derives its authority and legitimacy from the legislature. This is our parliamentary form of government which we are following. The legislature makes the laws which the executive implements. Yes, Himanshu, you want to ask something? Hello? Can you unmute yourself? Yeah. Yes, Himanshu. Yeah, tell me.
So when it comes to forms of government,
Yeah.
is there a difference when we use the terms authoritarianism and totalitarianism?
See, authoritarianism is, it, as the name indicates, it is basically through authority. No, authority, I tell you, authority and power are slightly different. Authority flows out of law, rules. Even if, suppose tomorrow you become an IAS officer, you will be having a certain kind of authority which the law permits you. So that, how do you use that authority? When it is controlled by a person who has got authority which is sanctioned by the law, that is authoritarianism. And the second part, what did you say?
So I was talking about the difference between, I understood authoritarianism.
No, what about the second one?
The other word was totalitarian.
Totalitarian means, again, like, it is complete control. Whether the authority flows, that power, here the comes of power comes, power and authority. In totalitarianism, there's total, control by sheer power. But in the first part, it was authority which flows out of law, where the sanction of law is there. But in the case of totalitarianism, is total control by use of power. Okay?
Okay, sir.
Thank you. Now, head of the state is de jure. Here, I am using the two terms de jure and de facto. De jure, what do you mean by? See, this word comes from, I'll make it very simple for you. Yesterday, I told you juris when we studied jurisprudence, which means law. Okay? De jure means by law. By means of law, he is the head of the state. De facto, it is by way of fact, actual, in actual. अब मैं आपको फर्क बताऊंगा. I'll tell you the difference how these terms will be using in legal parlance very frequently. De jure, de facto, de jure, de facto. But first, try to understand what do these two terms mean. Now, as we said, by law, head of the state. Now, who is the constitutional head of law? In India, head of the state is the President of India. He is the constitutional head of the state. In the states, who is the head of the state? It is the governor. Now, which law permits them? That law is the Constitution of India. They are appointed, they are given certain authorities, certain functions, which we will be studying. There is a separate topic on that. But law gives them the authority to be head of the state. And that is why they are called de jure. By means of law, they are the head of the state. But now, can President of India work on his own? Can governor of a state govern or work on his own? No, they cannot. They are guided and advised by whom? By the Council of Ministers, headed by whom? The Prime Minister. The Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister, and then in fact, who becomes the head of the state? De facto, that is the Prime Minister. And the Council of Ministers headed by him. So here, de jure is what? Who is the de jure head of the state? The President. Is it clear? I think I cannot more simplify the things. So de jure is by law. By law, he is the President is the head of the state, constitutional head of the state. De facto, in fact, in actual practice, is the Prime Minister who is heading the Council of Ministers, because President functions by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. So we have the example is India. Presidential system. What happens in presidential system? Here, the executive branch is headed by the president, who is the head of the state. And he serves as both head of the state as well as head of the government. So there is a single entity who is heading both. He is working as a head of the state also, and he is both de jure and de facto. And what is the example? United States of America. Okay. Now, I didn't want to use the term federalism here, but just to, because we have a separate topic on this, we have a separate session on federalism, where we'll be studying this term in great detail. But for the time being, just see that it's a political concept. What happens? In federalism, different units come together, they join together by way of an agreement or a treaty, and that federal structure is formed. They are autonomous units. They are independent units, but they have joined together on certain terms and conditions as to defense of the country, the finance of the country, of the states or the units will be governed by the federal government. So we will study it in great detail afterwards. Don't get confused. It will be quite simplified by me at that time. So the sovereignty is divided. Don't spend too much time on this. I'll again take it up when we get into details of this. Just remember that in a federal structure, different units come together by way of an agreement. Now, let us quickly go through the Indian legal history because it's just for your knowledge. It's not going to, figure in your syllabus in great detail. But as a law student, as a student of law, with the legal acumen, we must have some knowledge of the legal history. So we'll start with Government of India Act 1858. You know what had happened in 1857? The first war of independence. That was the first challenge to the British. Before that, we had East India Company. But then, after this act came into being, the British Parliament started making laws for India, and we were governed by those laws made by the British Parliament. So the entire governance of the country was with the British through their parliament. So it was highly centralized, unitary setup, but they set up all India civil services were created through this act. We'll see later, but just try to just have a brief idea about this. So Indian territories of Britain were to be governed in the name of British Queen. Then came the 1892 Indian Councils Act. Certain changes were brought. 1909 Indian Council Act of 19, also called Morley Minto Reform. These are all in the form of reforms. You may study it in the history, but as a law student, just remember these events. Then we had, Montego-Chelmsford reforms came into force in 1921. Diarchy dual form of government was established at the provincial levels, then prepared the ground for Indian federalism. This is why I took up this, because this was a basis, a foundation of Indian federalism was prepared. So the bicameral central legislature, that is two houses, were there, Council of States and the state legislative assemblies. Public service commissions were established. So, Government of India Act of 1935 is very important for us because we have derived, it was called a mini constitution of that time. So, before independence, we had this very important act. We have, in Indian constitution also, we have derived certain parts, certain, features from Government of India Act 1935. So, governor was to act on advice of ministers, establishment of federal court. Federal court is now the Supreme Court of India. Act divided into powers between center and units in terms of three lists. There were federal list, provincial list, concurrent list. Now what we have is a union list, a state list, and a concurrent list. So that's why I'm saying some features of 1935 Act have been adopted in the Indian Constitution. So to know about this act is very important for us. Now we come to our own constitution. It is the fundamental and supreme law of the land. A very important document for us. This is the supreme law of the land. A body of fundamental principles or established precedents, according to which a state or other organization is acknowledged to be governed. Actually, constitution of any country, any state, determines what will be the structure of governance of that particular country or state or nation will be. Now, our constitution, the Constitution of India, has laid down that what will be our system of governance, that is republican system and democratic system, and certain principles which we have and which are enshrined in this Constitution of India. Everything is being governed by this. All laws must conform to Constitution of India. Any law which is not conforming to Constitution is struck down as ultra virus. That ultra virus means beyond powers. We'll study this, but just remember it is the supreme law. It determines the form of governance a nation adopts, prescribes the extent of the sovereign powers. Sovereign powers, I said, are the prerogative of a free, independent nation. So, this constitution prescribes the extent of those powers, sets out the framework and principal functions of the organs of the government. So each organ of the government is determined, a framework is set up and which is there in the constitution of that country. Now, when we talk of the Constitution of India, it's the longest written constitution of any independent country of the world. First important feature. So, the Constitution in what was enacted and adopted in the year 1949, that is 26th November 1949. It originally had 395 articles divided into 22 parts and 8 schedules. And present situation is we have 104 constitutional amendments and preamble 470 articles divided into 25 parts, 12 schedules and 5 appendices. This is the present form. Adopted on November 26th and came into force on 26th January. Derives its authority from the people of India. The people of India have given themselves this constitution. We'll study in detail later. Now, I am giving you a very beautiful picture about the sources of Indian Constitution. From which source, which particular feature has been adopted, maybe in its totality or in some form or the other. So let us start with United Kingdom. Single citizenship, system of writs, legislative procedures, rule of law, parliamentary privileges, cabinet system, parliamentary system, bicameralism. Bicameralism is two houses. So all these features have been adopted from United Kingdom. See, our constitution is a very unique document. People may say that it has been copy-pasted. No, it is not like that. The constitution makers in the Constituent Assembly, they wanted to pick up the best features from any country, any constitution, which at that time was being implemented by various countries, because we wanted to have the best complete document of which will give us the best form of governance, the best practices and the best systems in place. That is why it we picked up various features from various sources. So one such source was this. Other sources, the Government of India Act 1935 I've just mentioned, Office of Governor, Federal System of Government, Judiciary, Public Service Commissions, Emergency Provisions. These were taken from this act. USA, removal of judges, fundamental rights. Very important, post of vice president, impeachment of president, independence of judiciary, a system of judicial review. So these features have been picked up from USA Constitution. USSR at that time, now USSR is not there. We have Russia and the other countries who were part of USSR at that time. So fundamental duties and ideal of justice, social, economic and political, as it appears in the preamble. We will discuss when we discuss the preamble in detail. France, republic character of the Indian Constitution, ideals of liberty, equality and fraternity. Very important to remember. From France, we have from Germany, suspension of fundamental rights during emergency. Then we have Japan, procedure established by law. Now, all these terms we will be studying and using, and they will find them in various provisions of the Constitution. Canada, residuary powers vested with the center, federation with a strong center. Sometimes we call it quasi-federal. So all these terms we'll study there when we study federalism. Appointment of governors by the center, advisory jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. This we will study when we study the functioning of the Supreme Court. Ireland, directive principles of the state policy, part 4 of our constitution. Method of election of president, nomination of members to Rajya Sabha, came from Ireland. South Africa, method of amendment of Indian Constitution, election of the members to Rajya Sabha. Australia, freedom of trade and commerce, concurrent list, joint sitting of both the houses of parliament. So, we have taken the best available practices from various sources across the globe, internationally, whatever best we could find, our constitution makers have picked them up and have given us this beautiful constitution. So, what are the salient features? Just have an idea. First and foremost, it is a written constitution. It is a federal polity with unitary bias. We'll study it further, but primarily you can understand, as I told you, federal structure is where the units come together and through an agreement or a treaty, they join and become a federal character, attain the federal character. But in India, it is not through agreement. Center has got, it is a federal system, it is a federal structure where states are the units. They have joined not by way of any agreement. They have formed a union. So, Union of India is a union of states. So, they have united together and they have no powers to go away, get away, cede from the union. It's only a one-way process, so not by way of any agreement. So, we have the democratic republic structure. We are a secular state. We don't have a state religion. We believe in secularism. Secularism is a one of the basic structures of our constitution. Universal adult franchise. It means any person who is an adult above 18 years of age has got a right to vote without any discrimination. That is why it is called universal. It applies to everyone. There is no discrimination. We have fundamental duties, very important. Duties of the citizens, Part 4A, included by 42nd Amendment. Okay, so we have fundamental duties. We have the parliamentary form of government. We have the part of the parliament, we'll just see. We have the independent judiciary. So there are three wings: the legislature, executive, judiciary. Judiciary is independent in our country, not to be influenced by anybody. They can take their own decisions. There's no interference in their appointments or in their service conditions. Now, going further, as I said, there are three parts. One is the legislature, executive, and judiciary. So, what does the legislature consist of? The two houses, Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. They form the parliament. Now, why do we include president in the legislature? Because any bill, yesterday we discussed how law is made, any bill which is passed by the two houses must get the president's assent to become a law, to become an act. That is why this is the legislative function of the president. But president is also part of the executive. How? He has every executive decision has to be taken in the name of the president, by order of the president. Though there may be delegation, the lower rung people or a particular, authority by law might have got that authority, might have been delegated with that authority to take decision, but the decisions, all the executive decisions are taken in the name of the president, who is the constitutional head of the state. So in the executive, we have the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers and the other forms of executives through ministries, through departments, etc. Judiciary, we have the Supreme Court, we have the high courts for various states, and then we have the lower courts in the districts and below that. So this is an overall governance system, which is also a parliamentary system of governance because of this. Parliament and the legislature consists of the parliament. So this is why we call it a parliamentary system in India. So friends, with this I come to an end of this session. As I indicated to you yesterday, that our aim is to understand various concepts first. And today we have tried to understand the concept of governance, various forms of governance. What is the form of governance in our own system in India? And what are the various other forms of governance in other parts of the world, in various other countries, to have a broad idea about the system of governance which is functioning, which is for us. So we are following the parliamentary form of governance, we have the republican form and the democratic setup, and the most important part is that we are a sovereign state, a democratic state where the people are the supreme. They elect their representatives who in turn govern them. So for us, knowing our own system is very important before we get into the detailed study of our constitution, which will be outlaying these systems. Okay, the provisions of the constitution, they will be studied in detail to know how this whole system works. What are the different concepts? We just mentioned secularism, we just mentioned republic, we just mentioned democracy, we just mentioned uh, justice, you know, equality, economic justice, socialism. So all these concepts, now we have a broad idea, a simplified understanding of the forms of governance and various terms which will be helpful to us when we study the other parts of the constitution in detail. Now the house is open for our discussion. You have any doubts, you want me to clarify any thing, kindly let me know. We'll do it right now. Otherwise, what I suggested was that you can make your own notes. See, I discussed with my fellow colleagues here, and they suggested to me that we should not give you printed notes on these because they're too simplified terms and cannot be converted into written form. But it is more important for me that you people understand these concepts, and when you understand, then you reproduce in your own handwriting, in your own words, and you can share with me. I'll give you my comments on that. Once I get time, I'll go through them one by one, and I will definitely give you my feedback. Yes, somebody wanted to ask something. Yes, tell me.
Sir,
Yes.
isn't democracy and republic
Hmm.
mutually exclusive? Aren't they mutually exclusive? Is republic not a part of democracy?
See, you,
Because
yeah. Tell me, complete. Yeah.
the terms and the meanings sound almost similar.
No, they may, see, I told you in the beginning itself, these terms are not watertight compartment or mutually exclusive. Republic means has a different meaning. Democracy has got a different meaning. There may be overlapping, there may be interconnection. How? I will tell you. I'll take you back to, uh, yes, now here we are. See, republic has got, the meaning is the public thing that is from the public, right? From the public means that public will elect or take a decision about who is going to govern them. That means the head of the state. From the public, the head of the state will come. This is the main concept of the word republic. From the public, republic. And the public, how it will govern through a leader who is the head of the state. This is the meaning of republic in short or in very, very simplified term. Now we come to democracy. See, I told you demo means the public and cracy means the rule, power or rule. There it was that they are electing the person or they are selecting the person who is going to rule them, who is going to govern them. Here, the rule is from the public. Now, in what manner? There are two ways how they will rule themselves, either directly through a direct process of voting or decision making, or through their elected representatives. Now, this word is very important as far as we are concerned as a democracy. Kaise? Just see. Who are the elected representatives? Whom we elect? They are the members of parliament. Directly in the case of Lok Sabha, indirectly in the case of the upper house, that is Rajya Sabha. Now, there it was head of the state will be elected by the people. Here, a body of persons who will be actually conducting the governance, that is elected by the people. There it was only the head of the state elected by the people. Now, this body of elected representatives, which is in the form of parliament, is actually running the country. The affairs of the governance is being conducted by them. In whose name, under whose stem, that is the head of the state, who is also elected by the people, maybe directly or indirectly. As in our case, the head of the state, that is president, is directed indirectly. So there is a difference, but both work together. The difference is there only the head of the state is elected or chosen by the people. Here, how the governance will be conducted? The governance will be conducted through the elected representatives, and they are also elected by the people. Now, once they are elected, they form a body who takes the decision, and that decision is implemented in the name of the head of the state. So, it has both the characters of a republic system and a democracy. I think I have made it clear to you. If any,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
thank you. Yes, please. Any other questions or any other queries or clarifications you want? Any one of you? Yes, please. Yeah, please speak.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, can you explain again the meaning of referendum?
Referendum. Okay, sure. Sure. Yeah. See, the first thing you must understand is the decision making. What is governance? Have you tried to think it over? What is governance? Governance is, yes, please. Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, continue. Yeah, continue, sir. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. See, governance involves what? Very important part, that is the decision making. There is a decision to be taken. I may say, let's say that the income tax limit should be increased from the present, let us say, 2.5 lakhs to 5 lakhs. That those who are earning 5 lakhs and below will not pay any income tax. One small simple example. Now, this decision, who will be taking? In our case, who takes this decision? The elected representatives, that is the parliament. In the budget, they will say, okay, or they will make some amendment to the Income Tax Act, or, pass a law. Basically, it is a decision which has to be taken by somebody. And who is that somebody? In India, we have the elected representatives. We all will not take a decision directly. We will not, the government will not tell us, okay, there will be a voting on this issue, whether income tax limit should be increased from this value to that value. This decision will be taken by the elected representatives through a process. What happens in the case of direct participation? That the decision making goes to the public, people. Now, what happens? If suppose this is the I repeat the same condition, the question before the nation is whether the income tax limit should be increased from this value to this value. In our case, it is the parliament or the elected representatives who will be taking this decision through a decision-making process. Whereas in some countries like Switzerland, it will go to the people directly. They will be casting their vote either in favor of this decision or rejecting this decision. So that process of going to the people directly and taking their views in the form of voting and in the process of decision making, that is called a referendum. When people, they themselves directly take all decisions. Now, Switzerland is a small country. Population is very limited. They can afford to go for referendum on even small decision makings. We cannot. Ours is a huge country. And that is why we have left this decision making to our elected representatives. We don't take every decision. We take only one decision every 5 years to elect our representatives through our vote. Whereas through referendum, every decision making is left open to the public and through voting. So they will decide. Understood? The decision making is directly with the people through a process of referendum. Referendum is nothing but a voting directly by the people for every decision making. Okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay, so if there are no further questions, tell me.
So this is not actually a subject specific question, but I wanted to get your thoughts on something.
Pardon? Your voice
This
is...
is not a subject specific question, but I wanted to get your thoughts on something.
Please ask.
So can our parliamentary system be changed to a presidential system? And is it something that we should look forward to or not?
Himanshu, I tell you, when we will study the constitution in detail, but I have already told you, our system of governance is based on what is written in this book. This is the Constitution of India. When we have to change any system from one form to another form, we have to change this constitution. We have to amend this constitution. Now, if suppose we decide to opt for from parliamentary system to presidential form of system, what will be the process? The process will be to amend or change this constitution. Yes, under Article 368 and as per the judgment of Keshwanand Bharti case, I will not scare you right now, but just for your knowledge, any part of the constitution can be amended. Any part. So, but they have put a very big rider on that it should not change the basic structure of the constitution. Here, if we opt from parliamentary system to presidential system, definitely we are going to change the basic structure. But in case the parliament passes the amendment and they give their own reasons, maybe merits or demerits of the system, then how to opt for the best system, or we have another constituent assembly and we change form another constitution, which is very difficult. But in the present form, if we want to have any amendment or change in the constitution, yes, the parliament has the power under 368 to amend, but subject to basic structure doctrine. So that part will go before the judiciary, and judiciary will decide whether it is affecting the basic structure or whether it should be allowed or not. So it's not that easy process. It's a very, though it's not impossible, but it's not that easy too. Now, as far as you are asking me, my personal this thing, being a student of law and being a formal civil servant, I have seen over a period of almost 30, 40 years, we are living in a parliamentary system. We have observed how the presidential forms of the government also works. There are merits and demerits of both. See, when we compare, why this question comes to our mind, we always compare with the United States of America, where we have the presidential form of government. I told you here also, in the presidential form, head of the state is also head of the government. He is a single person. Whereas we have the head of the state, constitutional head of the state, and also a de facto head of the government. That is the Prime Minister, heading a Council of Ministers. Now, there are merits in this system, there are merits in that system also. It all depends on how the country's culture is, how the country's people feel, they are comfortable with that. See, if majority of the people do not want a particular system of governance, they have every right to change the government and through their elected representatives go for a change of the system, again subject to approval, final approval by the judiciary. But if as a formal civil servant or as a student of law, I should say there are merits and demerits of both the systems. There are good things and bad things about all the systems, and particularly these two forms, because both are democratic forms. we are not violating the democratic principles. What we are, talking about is a change from one system to another system of governance. But how well suited it is for us and how well suited it is for the United States of America is for the analysis, for just to observe that and feel that. We can make comparisons, we can discuss about the merits and demerits, but yes, we can't say this system is best or that system is best. Both have their own plus and minuses. Now, whichever is best suited to us, to our country, I think that is the best one.
Okay, sir. I think that's all I wanted.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, any other question? So, I'll conclude with this and I'll request you once again to please make your own notes of whatever is being discussed here. And once you make your own notes, you please send them to me for my feedback. This will help you in turn because, you would know which part you have understood properly and in which part there are some gaps or some misunderstandings. So I'll try to remove that and simplify that so that you are able to understand them properly and which will be helpful to you in further studies of the subject. From tomorrow onwards, we will be taking up certain topics which are coming as a bonus to you. Why I am saying bonus? Because straight away I am not jumping again to the syllabus. Still, there are a lot of things which I want you to understand in the most simplified manner. And I tell you, whatever I am going to discuss from tomorrow onwards till a few days from now are going to help you in your general studies polity paper. Very important. Straight away the questions will be asked and you will be able to answer those questions correctly. So please don't miss any of these sessions. They may not be related to your law optional paper directly now, but they are going to help you tremendously in your polity paper and also strengthening your foundation for law optional, as we have done in the last 2 sessions. Okay? So, see you tomorrow. Till then, have a nice time. Just go through once again what we have discussed today. Thank you very much.
For more videos, subscribe to BN by IAS and press the bell icon to never miss an update.